Once again, a ton of us ended up voting wrong on the polls because Volvo is next to join the fight. And I thought this feeling would get old a lot quicker, but no, really, it hasn't. I'm still just as excited and just as pumped whenever a major automaker, especially a legacy one, decides to adopt the superior NACS connector. Not only is this a great fit because they're relatively early in their electrification process, but also they've already placed the charge port on their vehicles in the proper location, the driver's side back, which is the same as Tesla's existing vehicles, which yes, does in fact mean that next year, just like everybody else, Volvo will be able to use a magic dock style adapter that they can take with them, plug it into the supercharger cable, and then plug it into their CCS car, and the cable should reach. Unlike the Rivian, unlike the Fords, which are going to be occupying multiple stalls or having to play some kind of crazy parking gymnastics in order to get the cable to plug into their vehicle, but not Volvo. They get to plug in just like a Tesla does thanks to that charge port location. What's interesting though is how these announcements progressively get like more and more chill and lazy. Volvo is excited about the adoption of NACS, I'm sure, but they also decided to not really formally announce it themselves. Their Twitter account hasn't been active in a long time, so I'm guessing they weren't a big fan of Elon taking over. So Tesla decided to make this announcement for them. No, it was not through a Twitter Spaces or anything, just the Tesla charging Twitter account officially coming forward and saying, welcome Volvo to Tesla superchargers starting in 2024 with an adapter, and then fully fledged NACS adoption in 2025. I think this instantly makes the recently announced Volvo EX30 a heck of a lot more interesting because they claim this vehicle is going to be affordable for the masses and still be profitable for the company to ramp up. You know, the smallest Volvo ever. Definitely grabbed a ton of people's attention in regards to electrification accessibility to the masses, and now knowing that that incredibly compelling vehicle, and now knowing that that vehicle is going to have supercharger access and then later on NACS fully integrated, yeah, that makes this vehicle way more appealing than it was just a few days ago. The other main reason it's great that Volvo is going to be switching to NACS and supercharger access is because they, unlike Lucid and unlike Hyundai and Kia, are still using a 400 volt architecture, which means their vehicle architecture is much better optimized for the supercharger network because superchargers are, at least in their current state, optimized for 400 volt vehicles like the Model 3, Y, S, and X, which is all just a complicated way of saying that even with this adapter once made available and once NACS is integrated into Volvos, they should be able to achieve peak charging speeds of well over 200 kilowatts, just like a Model 3 or Y is able to do. So no charging speed limitations to worry about when it comes to Volvo. I don't know why we didn't include this in our polls in the past, but most people were still feeling pretty confident that Hyundai and Kia were going to be making that switch, but I genuinely think because of their higher voltage architecture, they've kind of backed themselves into a corner now where they're like, what should we do? Because our charging speeds are going to be substantially limited if we switch to NACS, but not Volvo because they're optimized for 400 volts. On that same note, we also have standardization of NACS taking place for the SAE, which for some of us may feel like more of a formality. Like, yes, the whole industry was already kind of adopting NACS and saying they were going to switch to it anyway. But I guess the main reason a lot of people were excited to see the SAE formally adopt NACS and say they're going to expedite that standardization process is because this allows third-party manufacturers and charge operators to adopt NACS without necessarily having to partner or come to some sort of agreement with Tesla themselves. And I believe this helps with the communication protocol being more isolated and more independent, which this was a concern some automakers were having that I've seen brought up by the community, which is like, if you were developing a prototype vehicle and you wanted to test it on DC fast charging stations, all of that data of what kind of vehicle it was and how big the battery pack was would become abundantly clear to Tesla if you went to a supercharger and plugged it in. But if you make the NACS port a third-party adopted standard so that it's a bit more anonymous who's plugging into the vehicle, then that allows you to develop prototypes in future vehicles that can plug in and test their DC fast charging with the NACS port without having Tesla know about it. So even though a lot of major automakers had already switched to NACS without the SAE's help, I think this will help kind of the last major players that are probably going to drag their feet a bit on NACS for a while. But it's also great to see ChargePoint start already making announcements saying they're going to start having native NACS support for DC fast charging at their chargers. Once again, this is just a reminder that just because companies are switching to NACS, that does not mean that Tesla has a monopoly on all EV charging, because third-party charge operators like ChargePoint will be able to supply NACS now since it is an open standard. They don't have to pay Tesla a royalty. Tesla doesn't get a fee every time someone uses a NACS port. It's open. That means all kinds of companies can manufacture it, not just Tesla. That's what helps with the SAE standardizing it, and that's what the EVgo network is promising, as well as the Blink network. Tons and tons of other charge providers are going to start implementing their own NACS connectors and probably relying on all kinds of different third-party manufacturers now that the dimensions have been released by Tesla and the communication protocols and how it works and everything. So essentially, my dream is literally unfolding for me in real time. One port, and it's the best one, being adopted by everybody, all the charge providers, and essentially, last one in is the rotten egg. The more and more companies prolong this adoption of the connector, the more and more dated and less desirable your vehicle is going to be. But I'm pretty confident there's one company that is not going to support NACS, and that would be Lordstown, for a whole bunch of reasons. But what do you guys think now of Volvos? Are you more interested in them now? Are you more worried about supercharger access in 2024 as they get flooded with all of these CCS1 vehicles? And once again, who do you think is next? Who do you think is last? Feel free to let me know down in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.